Hello world. Today we're going to do the stamina system, and first I just wanted to go over a couple little changes I made. So you'll notice in our character masterclass here, I actually changed the base mesh to the Raptor mesh itself, and I will have this file as well as his textures here in a link in the description so that you can download it and use it as you need as well. If you have any issues, go ahead and let me know and I'll see about helping you out, but it should be fine. It comes with all its animations and everything like that. So really quick, I have the animation blueprint here. We're going to actually work more on this in the next tutorial. That was going to be all about the animations and how to blend them together and things like that, with the head turning when you rotate, or things like that, so that it works nice and smoothly, just like in the aisle. Again, that's our focus, is to kind of replicate a lot of those mechanics. But for now, I just wanted to show you a couple little changes that I made. So if we go into the event graph here, and again, remember this is our master class. If you go, you can see the begin play. A lot of this is just the base stuff that starts with a character class. We're going to leave that there. And over here, I added this little bit. All this is doing, it is taking whatever our baby size is, and it is setting the capsule component to that scale. We're doing this at the start here so that we make sure it starts as a baby and at the correct size, whatever that may be, based on whatever this value is, so it's not hard-coded in. But later on, we're going to actually change a lot of this so that it actually will load from saved player data, so that you can continue at whatever progress you were actually at when you last left the game. But that'll be later. Right now we're just gonna go ahead and throw that in here. Make sure you do that. And then we're gonna go to our child class. So I remember last video I told you how you can make a child class that will inherit all the code from the master. Right click, create child class, and then name it whatever. I made a new folder for one of the child classes, which is definitely something I suggest. You really want to make sure you're keeping organized as you go through this stuff, otherwise it's gonna blow up real quick on you. So I have a new folder. Here's my child class called Raptor. You can see he's a child of the master class here. And you'll notice I added these variable, I updated these rather. Remember that we made these before. These are from the master class, so I'm updating them here, and I want to do it before we actually get to the begin play of the parent. The reason why is so for things like baby size, which here I have it set to 0.25, which is really tiny. I want to make sure that I have that information already set up before I get to this point. So the begin play of the parent class, it runs through this stuff, then it sets the world scale for the capsule to baby size. But I need this already set before we get to there. So that's why I'm doing that here before we get to the parent begin play. And to do this, really easy. If you don't know, you just right click. You can type in whatever the variable name is, baby size, set baby size, and there you go. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is focus on adding input, because we want to be able to sprint, as well as a few other things of course, but right now we're focusing on sprinting. And in order to do that, we need an input. And our input, when we're done, is going to just look like this, where we're taking the input, we're taking whatever the value of that input is, and we're setting it to a new variable we're going to create called sprinting. So let's get to doing that. So if we go back to our main folder, I've added another new folder. Again, we want to keep very organized, and this is called input. I'm going to go in here. I have this guy. Don't worry about that just yet. We'll make another folder in here called actions. If I open that up, you see I've got jump, look, move, and sprint. I'm going to have some more like sit, things like that, but right now, let's just do a sprint. So to do this, you just right click, you go to, where is it? We want the action, oh here we go, input. You go to input action, you're going to click on that, you're going to create a new one, and you're going to name it. You want to really name the things that you create here from the different classes as something that is recognizable. So for each one of these, I have it set as IA underscore, then whatever the name of the action is. IA being input action. So once you've created that, go ahead and open it up. And what you want to do, most of this you can just ignore. You don't got to worry about most of this. You want to make sure the value type is bool. I think that's what it'll be for default. And then for triggers, you want to click this button until you've got 2 of these here, 2 array elements. For the first one, you want to have it pressed, 0.5. And for the second one, release. So we're basically saying press will change the bool to 1, released will change the bool to 0. All this is doing is toggling a bool on and off whenever this gets called. And the threshold here shows how long you need to hold the button down. It's not for very long, or however long you're basically actuating this, however long you're pressing, whatever it is. The cool thing about this system for input is that you can also change it to player mapping later on, so that players can kind of set wherever they want their keys to be. And we'll eventually get to that, but we're not going to do that yet. So make sure this is all set the way you see here. When you're done, save that. Close it out, and then we're going to go over to back to our input folder. We're going to create something right here. It's called input mapping context. So we go to input, and again you just right click in the folder, input mapping context. We want to name that IMC and then whatever you want to call it. For here it's just the default one. I'm actually using the kind of default and just adding on to that because why create something that's already there. So then open that up. And you're going to have jump. Actually, let's just kind of clean this up a little bit. So for mappings, you want to make sure you've got jump, move, look, and sprint. You can just click this until you've got 4 here for the first one. You want to make sure you click on this and just hit spacebar, and that'll automatically assign it there. And then we don't need to worry about the triggers or modifiers. All of this is automatically going to be set whenever we have our input action. And again, if you don't have your actions here, if you're kind of making this from scratch, then it's going to be very similar. For jump, for example, press released, it's going to have the same 0.5. It's going to be a bool. And then for your look and your move, it's a little bit different. Oops. Come on, get in there. It's going to be an axis to D. And you want to just make sure it's set to that. I mean, you don't really need to do anything else. It's kind of basic. I think it's the same thing with move, if I recall. Yeah, it's axis 2D. So both of those, just make sure they're set to axis 2D. You don't have to do anything else. But yeah, so once you have all of these set up, go ahead and pull up your IMC. And make sure you're setting this. So you have jump, move, look, sprint. For jump, spacebar, or whatever you want it to be. I try to go with stuff that people would expect in a game, and you want to kind of do that. You don't want to get fancy and unique here. You really don't. You want it to be things that players expect. There are other places to get fancy. So for this, you don't really need to do anything. Just make sure it says a spacebar. You've also got gamepad options. These come with the default. You can set those if you want. Up to you. I kind of mostly just ignore all that, to be honest, as long as spacebar is set. And then for move, WSAD, excuse me. And just make sure that you're following all of this. If you don't have it already set, I already do, because again, I'm just using the basics here, not doing anything fancy. Just make sure all of these are set. Up, down, left, right is all going to be the same as WSAD, so we're not going to go over that too much because that's not really what we're here for. But, so let's move. Look. It's going to be mouse XY to D. Make sure that you just have all this set. It's Y there. Just Y is clicked or selected. So make sure that you have that set the same for look. Alright. So then for sprint, and we're probably going to change some of this later on just so you know, because we're going to keep refining our controls here. So for sprint, this is where the bread and butter is. So we want to use the shift and the left shift and the right shift. So make sure that you just click this twice so that you have 2 of them. Set it to left shift, set it to right shift. And that's really all you need to do. These are already being, so we're just taking this action. If you, yeah, if you don't have this already set, you just click it, drop down, and just throw it in there. But it's just taking this action and saying what key is bound to that action. So what keys to expect to call this action. Really, really simple. That's all you got to do. And that's pretty much good to go. And then to make sure that's activating, in your begin play for your master character class, you want to make sure this is set appropriately, this part right here. So just copy this if you don't already have it. If you do have it, great. So you want to just get your controller, cast to that controller, click off that, type in enhanced, grab that. It'll give you this guy, check if it's valid, and then you would just take that and just do add mapping context. Click this drop down and make sure it's the one that we have. That's all you got to do here. This will give us access to all of those inputs that we've set. So that all out. Now that you have that, you want to make this. So you want to just do sprint and click on that guy. Make sure you get that in there. And that's what it's going to give you. And then you just want to pull off of this and click promote to variable and then name it sprinting. Or whatever you want to call it. I would definitely name it sprinting though because that makes sense. So make sure you do that. And this will be good to go. Okay, so we're already halfway there. The next thing we're going to do is add another timer. We've got the timer that we added for grow. We're going to add another one for updating stamina. Now there are a couple different ways you can go about doing this. You don't necessarily need to have a timer. You could just run it off of tick and just have, you know, event tick and then just do, you know, call update stamina function. But I don't really like running things off tick. Some things are okay. There's a lot of dispute in the game dev world over tick. But the reason why I prefer to run it off of a timer is because I can later access that timer and control it. So when you're creating this, you want to just do set timer by function. Click that. And then take this, pull off of it, and promote to variable, then name it stamina timer. And then later on, what we can do and why this is very useful is I can just get that variable. And then I could say pause the timer. I could say is the timer active? I could say, just a second there, is the timer pause? Is it valid? Does it exist? There's a lot of things you can do with it that I prefer to give more control over that. So that's why I like to use these, and I can really refine when I want it to tick and put a delay in there, things like that. So I really prefer these. So we're gonna go ahead and set it to 0.005. The reason why we're doing that is so that it's ticking very, very quickly, very smoothly. We're not gonna really have a stutter issue, and eventually once we get to setting this up for multiplayer, which we will, we're going to have this run server side without the client having access to it. So only the server is going to be updating the client's stamina. The stamina will not be set by the client, it'll be set by the server so that the client can't hack it, basically. We don't want to give any opportunity for players to be hacking. That's a problem. So we want to make sure it's looped. We're going to give it a little start delay, and the reason why is because once you're into a multiplayer game, you have to ensure that the player is fully loaded in. Sometimes there could be hiccups with that, especially in regards to your connection and things like that. So a little 1 second delay just before that timer kicks off is kind of nice to have. And we're going to have the function name update stamina. So let's get to that. We're going to go ahead and put that in there, update stamina. Make sure that the uppercase, lowercase, spacing, all of that is identical to the actual name of the function. Okay? So then, once you have that in there, we're going to create the function. You just click a plus there and name it update stamina. In programming, you really want to try and keep your functions kind of standalone to where they could just be called and accessed from anywhere. It allows for what's called OOP, so object-oriented programming. It allows a lot of customization and that you don't have to go back and change a bunch of stuff. If some specific thing is bugging out or not working, if it's kind of condensed into a single little function, it's a lot easier to go back and debug that than entire strings of code that just run into each other forever and ever and ever. And if you're using blueprints, this is a lot easier to look at than, say, if I took this whole function for update stamina and just slapped it onto the end of this or whatever. So we're going to open that up, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more technical. I hope you're ready. Alright, so this is the update stamina function. It looks like a lot, but I'm promising you it's not complicated. It'll be really easy, and we're going to go through this together bit by bit. I have every little bit kind of named here and commented so that it's very easy to follow. And if you don't know how to comment, you just select something and hit C, and you can type in the comment. So that's really easy to do. It helps you kind of keep your stuff organized, and I definitely suggest doing it. It's just much easier. And especially if you start working on teams or anything like that in the future with other people, it's easier for them to read your code as well. So really quick, first we're going to go over this. So get current velocity. We're going to use this bit of code a lot here. And there's no point in doing this over and over and over. It just takes up space. So what you're going to do is you're going to do get character moment, which is here. You're going to drag out, get your velocity. Get velocity. And then you want to get the vector length xy. The reason that we're doing this is because it's essentially taking our velocity kind of in world space, and it's just giving us a solid float from that shows kind of just the general speed that we're moving at. So since we don't want to write this over and over, if you just take this, highlight that, right click it, and then you do collapse to function, it'll give you this function here. You can name it get current velocity. So that's what you want to do. Collapse that, turn it into a function, and then open it up. So I'm going to get rid of this here because we're just going to use this now. So once you have your get current velocity, you want to make sure it's set up like this. If you don't have your return, you just right click and just do return. And you take this and you can drag it into that return and it'll add a pin. And I just did that and then just rename that pin value right here. Real simple. So once you've done that, make sure that you kind of click this to get these guys open here, and make sure you click pure. This is a pure function, and a pure function is just a function that doesn't kind of really store it. It just returns data no matter what all the time. That it's very simple. you can read about it more if you want to. That's fine. But it's basically just a reliable function that doesn't get altered by anything. Alright, so now that we have that in there, we're going to go back to update stamina, and we're just going to plug that in here. So you can kind of copy this as we go through it. I'm not going to remake it since it's already here, but I will explain it to you because that's important. So the first part, we want to get our current velocity and check if it's greater than our walk speed. So basically, are we moving faster than our base walk speed? And if we are, we probably want to drain our stamina. So are we running, basically? Are we running, be that regular running or sprinting? And we want to add a little bit. So we're taking our base walk speed, that's a variable that we said earlier. We're adding just a tiny bit, just 5, just to make sure that it's not going to, if we kind of move down a hill, we get a little bit of speed to us because we're walking downward. If it's just a tiny bit, it's not going to really care about that. So we're just adding a +5 to it. So that +5. And again, if you don't know how to do this, just kind of look. You can tell by the symbols and the titles of things. So you would just get that, and then just literally just put that symbol in. It gives you greater. For this, you just put a plus sign. It gives you that. So then we want to check that. Are we basically moving faster than walking? Are we running? And we're going to go to the top part here first. So first we know, do we have enough stamina to run? Because we're trying to run, but can we run? So we're going to get our current stamina, and we're going to see if it is more than the stamina needed to run. You could also do, what is it? Equal, oops, do that backwards. Greater or equal to, so for example, if it is more than or the same as the stamina needed to run, which will be better, but this is just kind of basic for now. So if we have basically more stamina than the amount that we need to run, then we know that we at least have enough stamina to run, and it'll be okay, we can keep running. But if we don't have enough stamina to run, then we're going to go into a walk cycle. We're going to slow down, we're going to stop running, and we're going to just start walking instead. So we're just taking our movement. Again, that's this. This is just kind of controls and holds everything to do with movement, really. And you'll see there's all this stuff here that is relating to that when we click on it. So you just take that, and you just want to set max walk speed right there, and set that to whatever our base walk speed is. And again, the reason why we're using all these great variables is because we can change this anywhere. Like in the Raptor here, we have our base run speed's been changed, our run bonus, which we'll get to, and our max walk speed for this is the same as the default, which is kind of what we want to do for the most part. But we can change all that stuff so easily, and then all this code just works. So we're going to set our max walk speed to our base speed. So basically saying that we don't have enough stamina, so we're going to start walking instead of running now. If we do have enough stamina to run, then we need to see, well, how fast are we running? Are we sprinting? And remember that variable that we made earlier over here, we're going to use that here. So we're going to see, are we sprinting? If we are sprinting, then we're going to increase our run. We're going to take our max walk speed, and we're going to get our base run speed, which is our normal. So if we're not sprinting, we're just going to set our max walk speed as our base run speed. But if we are sprinting, we want to add our bonus here. So really, I should probably just rename this. Let's call this sprint bonus instead. Okay. So we're setting it to our max walk speed now that these two are combined, which means we're now running at 400 plus 200, so 600. So we're sprinting at 600, whereas our typical run is 400. And now that we've got our speed set, so this will tell, show that we're running faster or what have you, we're going to see how much stamina we want to drain. And the way we're going to do this is again, we're very much trying to mimic the Isle here, and I'm mostly just going off of a bit of play myself. If you find out I'm a little off with something, let me know. I am perfectly fine with that. I want to know if you're like, hey, actually the stamina drains like this. Like, okay, cool, let's go in and fix it and change it to where it perfectly matches as best we can to how the Isle works. But this is how I understand it for now. So we're going to get our current velocity. Remember, this is the function that we made earlier that we collapsed into. This is our little pure function. We're going to get that velocity. We're going to divide it by 10,000. The reason why is because we need this to drain. We don't want this to drain along with this, or else it's going to hit 0 by the time we take our first step. So I don't want to get too technical with the math, but basically you want to divide it so that it creates a very, very small number. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're going to multiply that with our stamina rate, our drain rate. And our drain rate is 0.5 here. So let's say that you wanted somebody who's got a lot of stamina, they can run for a really long time, right? What we could do is just, change our max stamina, which is fine. But it's actually a lot easier if we just kind of keep that to a default and change our drain rate instead. So maybe as I get older, I might have a slower drain rate. So I would turn this to like a 0.1 or 0.2. But when I'm young, let's say that I drain a lot faster. Or maybe it's vice versa. Or if it's a stego, maybe my drain rate is really high, like a 0.7. Whereas with a galley, maybe my drain rate is like a 0.1. And that means that it will, this basically, the lower the number it is, the slower it's going to drain your stamina. The higher the number it is, the faster. Okay, so this just gets the base how it's draining. And this is the only thing you really need to worry about changing here. Then we're going to update our stamina. So remember here really quick, the velocity is what's going to determine, the velocity multiplied by the stamina drain rate is what's going to determine how fast stamina goes. That means if we are sprinting, we're actually going to drain stamina faster because we're moving faster than if we're just running. So keep that in mind. It's kind of like how the Isle works. And we'll work more with this too later, where we'll have certain additions to it. For example, when we're doing an attack or a jump or something like that, we'll kind of add on to it a little bit. But this is very self-sufficient. So if we're running, it's going to drain a little faster, or excuse me, if we're sprinting, it's going to drain a little bit faster than if we're just running. And you can, again, you can adjust things. Adjusting the drain rate as well as your sprint bonus, things like that, will have an impact on how fast it actually goes. So the last thing we're going to do is update our stamina. We just spent stamina to run, doing all this, and now we're going to update it. So we're going to take our current stamina, we're going to subtract how much stamina it just costs us to run, and then we're going to clamp it. Clamping it means that we don't want it to go, we want it to clamp it between a value of 0 and whatever our max stamina is. This just stops it from going over for some reason or under. It's just a safety net. So you just would do, you know, drag out of that, do clamp. We want to clamp float. And then just make sure you take your max stamina, plug that into max, and keep this at 0. That way it'll never go below 0, and it'll never go above your max, as it shouldn't. And then finally, we're just going to get our current stamina here. So again, you could do get for that one, set for that one. We're going to set it to this end value here. And that will just get that all taken care of. So that's the whole top part, nice and done. Told you it's not that bad. Alright, so the bottom part here. So up here we were checking if we could run, right? Well, if we couldn't run, if we're unable to run because we just don't have enough stamina, we need to handle that too. So let's just see if we're even moving at all. If we are, again, we're getting our current velocity, we're using that little mini function that we made. So let's see if we are moving faster than just 10. And again, you want to have just a little bit, you don't want to just have it at 0 because sometimes anything can move you just a tiny bit, especially when physics are involved, so we want to give a little leeway. So I found 10 to be a good kind of number to rest on. So we want to get the velocity. We want to see if it's greater than 10. So are we moving at all? We know we're not running, but are we maybe walking, right? If we're not walking, if we're not moving at all, then we're either standing still or we're sitting or something like that. And we're going to actually add on later to this to check if we're sitting, and that'll actually give us some more. So that whenever we're sitting, we'll get a little bit extra stamina than if we're just standing around. But we'll probably do things like sitting, maybe in the next video, either we're going to do, well, okay, so yeah, the next video is going to have our blend space, our animation stuff, how we're kind of smooth that out. So we'll see if we can add that in there. We probably will be able to, but that'll be a really good one. You're going to like that one. So anyways, back to the actual subject at hand. So if we are not moving, if we're just standing still, we are going to get our current stamina. We're going to increase it by our stamina rest rate. So whatever this is, I have it set pretty low at 0.01. You probably actually want to set it even lower, like 0.001 or something like that. But just play with these values, figure out what you like and what feels comfortable here. Right now, I have these values a little higher than what you normally would in a game so that we can really see them when we're testing and it doesn't take forever to do that. So our current stamina plus our rest rate, and again, this is ticking. So this, every time this whole function ticks, it's doing this. And then we're going to clamp it like we did earlier between a 0 and a stamina max. Make sure that we don't go over or under. And then setting our current stamina. So we're taking our current, we're increasing it by our rest rate, and then we're setting it again. So all we're doing is basically adding to it. Right? Real simple. And then these two are going to come together up here. So you want to, if we are moving, if we're walking basically, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to touch the stamina, but if we aren't, we're doing stamina, and then we're going to keep going on because both of these are going to check this. And we're just going to check every time that we go through here, do we have enough stamina to run again? Because it's building up, so every time that this increases, that the stamina increases, we want to make sure, like, okay, well, can we run now? Can we run now? We want to keep checking that. If we take our current stamina, again, we did this earlier, make sure that it is greater, or check if it's greater than our stamina needed to run. So do we have enough to run? We want to, if we do have enough stamina to run, we're going to change our base, our max walk speed back to our run speed. So our default is going to be that base run speed. And maybe later what we'll do is add a toggle where you can toggle between walking and running so you can decide whether you want to consume that. And for now, we're mostly just mimicking kind of how the aisle works, but what we do want to do later is maybe make some adjustments that we feel would be a bit better mechanically, and that's probably going to be one where we can toggle between walk and run. I think that's very important, so we'll get to that. But for now, we're setting our run speed, or our walk speed, our base speed that we're at, our default speed. We're setting it back to our run speed if we have enough stamina to run. If we don't have enough stamina to run, we're going to just keep it at the walk speed, that slow walk speed. And walking doesn't drain any stamina, but if we're walking, we're also not gaining stamina back. That's another thing I would personally maybe change. I would have it where perhaps if we're sitting, we get, or if we're sitting, we get a pretty good amount of stamina. If we're just standing still, we get a little bit more than normal. And if we are walking, we just get a tiny bit. So that there's a tier of walking, get a little stamina, standing, a little bit more, sitting, you get a lot more. But again, we're just kind of trying to mimic the aisle right now. We'll do that stuff later. So that's the whole function. That's this whole update stamina function. It's not as complex as it looks. It's pretty simple. And especially if you break it up and have these comments here, it really helps to understand and just work through it. Okay? Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is add our UI. And we probably could have gotten that into the last video that we did. But we wanted to keep it kind of simple starting out. This video is going to be a little bit more than the previous ones. So let's go back to our main folder here. And we're going to add another one. It's going to be called UI. And again, we want to keep organized, keep all this stuff separate, keep it nice and, clean. So make your UI folder and open that up. And we're going to create a widget blueprint. So you want to just right click, go to user interface, widget blueprint, and select user widget. And then name it whatever you want to name it. So I'm going to name this, let's see, we're going to do this together because this is a little bit more here. A little bit more nuanced. So I'm going to name it that. You want to name it probably UI, but name it whatever you want to call it. It's going to be our main UI. And later on we're going to change this to where, just like in the aisle, you would hit escape or whatever to pull up your stats, and then your main HUD is just going to have a couple elements on it here and there. But for right now, we're kind of just tracking things and keeping an eye on where it's going. Alright, so open that up. First thing we want to do is add a canvas. The canvas basically just holds whatever we're putting on here. So just grab that and drag it onto here, or you can drag it here, wherever you want to put it. I personally prefer to drag it there, but as you can see, it's the same thing. Alright, so we got our canvas panel, and we need to, put stuff in it so that we can see things. But first of all, we need to be able to actually create this. So make sure you compile and save, by the way. And do that a lot. Compile and save your brains out because crashes suck. So now that we've made this, we're going to get back to this in just a second here. But first we need to make sure that we can actually access it. So let's go back to main. And if you don't already have a player controller, make sure that you create one. So just right click, blueprints, blueprint class, click player controller, name it whatever you want to call it. Mine's just BP controller. You want to open this up and get your pawn. So when you get your pawn, drag off, promote to burial, set it to pawn ref. We kind of want to have access to the character that the controller is controlling. So I don't want to go too into detail. A lot of this stuff is just stuff you can look up. If you're a super beginner, definitely look up some beginner tutorials on just how to create a character, how to create a controller. But I'm gonna hope that people are at least have a little experience with Unreal, and if you don't, this in particular is stuff that's really easy to look up. It takes half a second to do, and then you can just get back to the video. So set your pawn reference here, and then you want to, don't worry about this part here, but you just want to do create widget, right? Create widget. From here, you want to find that widget you just made. So for me, it's tut UI. For you, it's whatever. And then owning player, drag off this and just type self. Once you have that, again, we're going to make another reference. So we're going to drag off of it, promote to variable. We're going to just call that UI. And then the important bit is from there, you want to do add to viewport. this is going to, so what we're doing here is we are creating that HUD, that widget, right? A widget is just a visual element. It's part of your UI. We're creating that HUD, that UI, and then we're setting it so we can access it later to a variable, and then we're just adding it to our viewport so that we can actually see it. If you create it and you don't add it to your viewport, you're not going to see it. You need to make sure you're adding it to your viewport, okay? Alright, so let's go back into our main folder. We're almost done doing this part, I promise. It won't take long. So let's go back into our main folder. So we need to make sure that our controller is actually being set, that it's being used, it's accessed, right, whenever we're playing the game. We don't want it to just use a default controller. We also want to make sure that we're using whatever our starting class is. So our current starting class, if you go into, if you're here on this screen, right, and if you've got details, whatever, I'm using world partitioning, don't worry about that, world settings. Down here under game mode, we have our game mode override, okay? You can see here that I've made a game mode. You want to make sure that we're using that game mode. So, right click, blueprints, or excuse me, where was it? It's fine, just go to blueprint class there, and then just click game mode. And then name it, whatever, name it GM underscore main. So again, you see them using like BP for blueprint, whatever. And then making the names real obvious and easy to find later. And then just GM for game mode and main. A game mode is the kind of overarching thing that controls the rules of the game. Just really kind of server side stuff, like how the players join the game, how many players can join the game. It kind of keeps them organized, overarching map related stuff, things like that, things that are just the whole game, the server, stuff like that, management of that along those lines. So in the game mode, if you have this open, just go click on open full blueprint, and you just want to make sure in here, this is where it matters, you want to make sure your player controller class is set to the new one we just made, and that our default pawn class, we want to set that to our new Raptor class, our Raptor that is a child of the master class. Don't use this, use the child class that you made. And again, later on, once we have like a selection screen where you can choose what dinosaur you want to play, this will be automatically updated to whatever that is when we join. But right now, this is what we're going to do. The rest of this stuff, don't worry about it. It's fine. So make sure you save, compile and save that. And then we're going to go back in here and then just click on that and select that to whatever your game mode is. Alright, so now that our game mode knows what our controller is, it's using that new one that we made, it's using our specified character type, we're going to go back into our UI and get that finished up. So we have our canvas here, and then what we're going to go ahead and do real quick is go ahead and type in, border, I can spell. Click that, drag that on there, wherever you want to put it. I like to put it up here in the corner. Maybe like that. We're going to make this all really fancy and pretty later, but right now we're not terribly worried about it. So we've got that there. And maybe I'll change the color, not that. Let's go down to appearance, brush, don't do content. Go to appearance, go to brush color. Let's turn that to black, with maybe an alpha of 0.8, so it's slightly transparent. And then I like to do, where you see how it says draws image, click on that, and do rounded box. You see how that rounds the edges? It just feels a little bit more modern than just square boxes. And then now that we have that in there, we're going to throw in a text. Now this is going to be back to, so you'll remember that we did our growth cycle and we had it where it was baby, juvie, subadult, adult, and we wanted to kind of see that happening. Let's go ahead and throw in a quick bit of text here to kind of show that the way that I had that set up, so that you can do that too if you'd like. And you can kind of use this to figure out what else you want to do with your UI. It kind of gives you some ideas, right? Let's justify that to center for that text there. Again, it's just a text. And we want this to be a variable that's important, and we want it to be a name we recognize. So let's call it text stage. For the font, I am going to... I don't know, that's fine. We'll change it to that. And I think that's good. Maybe make this border a little bit less, more like that, right? We want to give it a little bit of space whenever it says like a sub-adult juvenile because they're a little bit bigger. So, and then up here, let's take the default text right here, and let's just do baby, because that's what it's going to be starting out, right? Compile and save. So, the next thing we're going to do to plug this in really quick, just backtracking a wee bit here, we're going to go back into our master class here, and we're going to go back to our grow function that we made earlier. And you'll remember that I had, so we've got all this here, right? You'll remember that over here, I had this set text stuff. So you can do that now too. So you've got, just take your controller reference, whatever that is. You want to set it to your UI. And if you don't have your controller reference, again, it's important to set that at the beginning here, beginning play. You're just getting your controller and setting it. So you want to just do get controller reference. We have that UI variable, that reference that we set. So UI, get UI. And now we're setting that variable for the text in that UI, set, oops, get text. We want to get our text stage. And then we're just doing set text. And then whatever that is. So really simple, you can add that on now, and that will work for you. So you can go ahead and watch whatever stage that you're at. And again, later on, we're going to move that into a panel that we can kind of open and close, like how they do in the aisle. We're going to have it all fancy and cool looking too, so don't worry about that. And any kind of UI elements that you might need to use to follow this, I will share. Anything I make that you're going to need, I will end up sharing with you so that you have all the resources you need for that. Okay? Alright, so we are in the final stretch of this tutorial. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to our UI here. We don't need this anymore, so let's just close the master class. Go back to the UI, we've got this set up, we don't need to worry about that anymore. And what we're going to do is add a progress bar. This is going to be for that stamina. So get a progress bar, drag that onto there. And we're going to stretch it out a little bit here. Okay. Let's change the fill color. I like to kind of go with like yellow or something for stamina. I don't know why, but that's what I think of. And then let's see. Do I want to go to style? Let's change the background hue to maybe black with another transparency of 0.8. And then here, see where it says progress? And if you can't find any of this, just type it in there. Or see how it says percent, you could just type in percent, right? So this is important, okay? For the progress bar's percent, we want to bind that, okay? So you can see it filling like this, right? If I move this up and down, it goes from 0 to 1. 0 to 1, keep that in mind. And so what I want to do is bind that by creating a binding here, right? Let's move this out. Okay. And for here, we're going to do get owning player pawn. So whatever character owns this UI. UIs are always client side. A UI cannot be accessed by a server. It is owned by the player. It is on the client side. That's it. So this will always return just whoever the actual player is. So you want to get that owning player pawn. We're going to cast to BP master class. Make sure it's not our child, our master class. Connect that. And then get stamina current. We want our current stamina. And then we're going to take this. Now remember, our current stamina here, if we go ahead and pull that up, is 100, right? And you can see that the max stamina is 100. So our current is 100. So we need to get this to work with a progress bar that maxes out at 1, right? Remember that. The percentage here maxes out at 1. So to make that work, we're just going to take this and we're just going to divide it. We're going to divide that by 100. This is another one of the reasons why it's a little bit easier, rather than just changing what our max stamina is to random variables, that we instead change things like our drain rate or our increase rate, because it's just so much easier to plug into something like a UI like this whenever it's just that steady number. So we're just going to take that and return it. So we're going to take this, divide it by 100, which will give us a percentage that matches with the progress bar. And then we're just going to return that. And what this is going to do is every single time, every frame, the UI is just going to check where's my stamina at, what's that doing, and it's going to update this progress bar, whatever that is. Okay? And also, really quick, make sure your progress bar is a variable, and you should also rename it so it's recognizable. So let's do stamina bar. Okay? So make sure that's a variable, make sure that it's got a name for it, and again, make sure that your percent is bound to that. We're going to eventually do this where it's a little cooler and more visual, like if you notice in the IO it's got like a footprint thing that fills up from the bottom up. That is really easy to do. I've done a bajillion of those. It does it basically like this. See how it's set to bottom up? Really, it'll be really easy. I'll show you how to do it. Super simple. It looks really cool. But this right now is what we're going to do just to test this all out, right? So we've got that plugged in. We should have everything plugged in. I think we're good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is just test it out. Alright, so we've got our baby here. You got our stamina bar up there on the top left. We can see that we're a baby. That's going to change to a juvenile in a second. And if I move around, look at that stamina bar draining. Now if I hold shift, check it out, I'm running faster and it's draining faster. But if I let it go, I go back to my normal run, it goes a little bit slower. If I stop moving, it starts to fill up. And you can see I'm now a juvenile as well. I can run around, it drains really slowly. If I go into a run, it'll drain faster again. And look, now I'm walking because it's maxed out. You see there's that little bit there on the left, so that's why what you might want to do is whenever you go into your stamina drain, which I'll probably change this actually, but where it says current is greater than, you might want to instead just do, you know, is equal to or greater. Let me say that backwards. Wow, I can do numbers and stuff. Greater or equal is probably better so that you don't have that little blip over there. It's a little bit more precise. So you'll probably want to do that. But in general, you can see that it works. It runs great. And if you have any issues with it, any little bugs or problems or anything like that, you can absolutely let me know. I will totally help you out. No issues. Just go ahead and leave a comment. Whatever your problem is, just make sure that if you have any issues that you're kind of try to be precise about it. Don't just say like it's not working because I don't know what that means. So think about a bug report, okay? You just want to make sure that if you ever have issues with anything, tell me what's not working and let me know kind of how it's not working, okay? And I will absolutely help you out. Alright, so there's that. We've got our little dude. We can, oh, that's my sit down button. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in the next one. And you'll also notice really quick, so when I'm running here, if I turn left, you can see his head turning. If I turn right, his head is kind of tail turns over. When I'm running and jumping, he does his little jump attack thing. It's nice and smooth. So those animations, we're going to get into doing blend spaces and how to do all that, how to set that up so it looks really cool. How to do like a cute little sit down animation, get up animation, stuff like that. So that'll be the next video. We'll go from there. It'll be great. It'll be lots of fun. If you guys have enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe, the usual junk. Let me know what you'd like to see more of. Let me know if there's anything I'm off about as far as the way the mechanics of the aisle work. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, so once again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.